Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about the murder of Alyssa Burkett.
Okay.
And we've got a really great 48 hours episode to go over with you guys. And it's got interviews with a bunch of people,
Right.
you know, the detectives on the case and Alyssa's friends and family.
Yeah.
And Andrew's mom is also interviewed in this.
Okay.
So you get a lot of different perspectives. And this case is really complex.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes way beyond just the headlines.
hmm
And we're going to talk about, all the events that led up to the murder and kind of the unexpected role of Andrew Beard's fiancée, Holly Elkins.
Right. Yeah, this case is really fascinating because it starts out as a seemingly simple, act of violence, but it just unravels into all these layers of like manipulation and obsession. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a really wild ride.
So Alyssa and Andrew started out with like a whirlwind romance.
Right.
They met, fell in love, they had their daughter Willow, and everything seemed perfect, at least at first. But when you watch the episode, you kind of start to see that they had these contrasting personalities and lifestyles.
Yeah, you can definitely see how those differences, especially when it comes to things like parenting styles and control, eventually become these like flashpoints as the relationship starts to, fall apart.
Right. And
Yeah.
there was a clear power imbalance, I think, too, from the beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's really heartbreaking when you hear Alyssa's family and friends talk about her growing fear.
Yeah.
Like she felt like Andrew was tracking her and like trying to set her up so
Mhm.
he could get full custody of their daughter Willow.
Yes. The 48 Hours episode lays out all these disturbing details
Right.
about her situation. I mean, remember the planted drugs and gun in her car?
Yeah.
That wasn't just some random incident. That was clearly a deliberate attempt to discredit her as a mother and make her look unfit to care for Willow.
Right.
And then you have that really chilling 911 call that was clearly fabricated to
Yeah.
make her look unstable.
And she reached out to authority. Right.
But they kind of dismissed it as paranoia.
Yeah. And it's tragic because these are all such crucial details.
Huh.
They point to this pattern of manipulation and escalating danger that unfortunately authorities didn't seem to fully grasp
Right.
until it was too late.
So this is where the story takes like a really unexpected turn.
Yeah.
Enter Andrew's new fiancée, Holly Elkins.
Okay.
So at first, she comes across as incredibly supportive.
Right.
Like she's genuinely interested in creating this healthy co-parenting relationship with Alyssa.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And then, right after Andrew is released on bond, Holly just like vanishes.
Yeah.
And then the investigation uncovers this deep hatred that she had for Alyssa.
Wow. This is where things start to get really interesting, would you say?
okay.
I mean, those derogatory text messages that Holly sent about Alyssa are so revealing.
Yeah.
Like they're not just, casual insults or her venting. The language she uses suggests a very calculated attempt to manipulate Andrew and further demonize Alyssa.
Right. It's almost like she's trying to erase Alyssa completely from the picture.
Yeah. I mean, some of the language in those texts is like,
Yeah.
it's not even just me. It's like dehumanizing.
Right.
Like she's trying to convince Andrew that Alyssa is a monster
Mm-hmm.
who doesn't deserve any compassion.
Right. Phrases like, quote, a specific example from the source.
Yeah.
Like, that's really disturbing because that kind of language is often a precursor to violence.
Right.
It allows the abuser to justify their actions by basically stripping the victim of their humanity.
So you have this really toxic triangle forming here.
Yeah.
Andrew, desperate to win custody of Willow.
Right.
Holly feeding into that desperation with her manipulation.
Mm.
And Alyssa just caught in the middle, fearing for her life.
Yeah, you start to see how easily Andrew falls under Holly's influence.
Right.
I mean, he's vulnerable. He's driven by this desire to have sole custody of Willow.
Right.
And Holly exploits that vulnerability to achieve her own goals.
And the 48 Hours episode shows you all these examples of her manipulative texts.
Like, she's constantly pushing Andrew to take action, feeding his anger towards Alyssa.
Right.
It makes you wonder if he was just a pawn in her game.
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
I think it's crucial to recognize that while Holly might have been the driving force in all of this, Andrew ultimately chose to act
Yeah.
on those manipulations. But to really understand the extent of Holly's involvement, we need to dive deeper into the FBI findings that came to light after Andrew agreed to a plea deal.
And that's where things get even darker.
Yeah.
The plea deal reveals just how deeply Holly was involved in planning and executing Alyssa's murder.
Right.
It's not just manipulation anymore. It's like a full-blown conspiracy.
And there's this one detail from the FBI findings that always gets me.
Okay.
She actually demanded that Andrew describe the murder to her in bed.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't just about getting rid of a rival,
Right?
It was about deriving some sort of twisted pleasure from the act itself.
Wow.
Like, that level of detachment is chilling.
Yeah.
It really is.
No.
Okay, so
That. That's just crazy to think about someone being capable of something like that. But I mean, let's talk about like the evidence they had against Holly.
Well, yeah, I mean, the evidence they found on Holly's phone was pretty key in convincing the jury that she was guilty. The prosecution, they laid out all these digital breadcrumbs that connected her to the crime.
Okay.
Searches for trafficking devices, information about, where the murder weapon was bought, and even, details about the disguise that Andrew was wearing.
So she was meticulous.
Oh, yeah.
But she still got caught.
Yeah, it's like her digital footprint betrayed her in the end.
Well, and it's like, Alyssa tried to report this behavior.
Right.
But nothing was really done. Like, why wasn't more done to protect her?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
And it points to this failure that we see a lot in domestic violence cases.
Right.
The 48 Hours episode does a good job of showing how the legal system sometimes doesn't do enough to protect victims.
Yeah.
Especially when the abusers are really manipulative and seem charming on the surface. Right, and Alyssa was clearly terrified.
Yeah.
And they just dismissed it as paranoia.
It's so frustrating.
Even that incident with the planted drugs and the gun.
Yeah.
He didn't even get arrested for that.
It's scary to think how many other victims are out there silently suffering because their abusers are really good at manipulating everyone around them.
Right.
It's a reminder that these abusers, they wear masks, They project this image of normalcy and respectability.
Yeah.
But underneath, they're controlling and abusive.
So how can we do better as a society?
That's the question.
How can we, learn to see those red flags?
Well, for starters, we need to educate ourselves about the patterns of abuse. It's
mean,
not always physical violence. A lot of times it's emotional manipulation, financial control, isolating the victim from their loved ones.
Yeah.
And just constantly eroding their self-worth.
So it's not always the obvious signs we have to look for.
Right.
It can be much more subtle.
Exactly. Abuse exists on a spectrum.
Okay.
And it often involves a combination of tactics.
Yeah.
Designed to trap the victim in this cycle of fear and dependence.
It's crazy how they can do that.
And most importantly, we need to create a culture of belief.
Yeah.
When someone comes forward with allegations of abuse, we need to listen to them with empathy and take their claims seriously, even if they seem unbelievable at first.
Because they're scared to come forward a lot of times.
Exactly.
The abusers hold that over them.
Right.
But it's not just about individuals, right?
Oh, no.
It's like systemic change.
Yes, absolutely.
So what can we do on a larger scale to prevent these types of tragedies?
Well, law enforcement and the justice system in general need to be better equipped to recognize domestic abuse.
Okay.
That means more thorough investigations, better training for officers, stricter penalties for the abusers.
So it's a multifaceted approach.
Exactly.
Education, awareness, and systemic change.
You got it.
So Andrew confessed to the murder as part of a plea deal.
Right.
So what were the specifics of that deal?
So basically, in exchange for a reduced sentence, Andrew agreed to cooperate with the FBI
Okay.
and provide all this detailed information about Holly's involvement.
Okay.
So that included access to his phone, which had all those incriminating text messages from Holly.
Wow.
And he ended up being sentenced to 43 years in federal prison
Okay.
for his role in the murder.
43 years. Does that really feel like justice, though?
I mean, that's a question that comes up a lot in cases like this.
Right.
Some people believe that no amount of prison time can make up for taking a life,
Yeah.
while others argue that the justice system has to focus on punishment and deterrence.
Yeah.
So it really depends on your perspective.
Okay, so what about Holly?
Wow.
She seemed so confident
Oh, yeah.
when she talked to the detectives.
Yeah, she was adamant that she had nothing to hide.
So how did they get her?
Well, those text messages we talked about, those were a big part of it.
Okay.
The prosecution used those messages to show her manipulative tactics, her jealousy, her detachment from the murder.
But was that enough?
I mean, the texts were crucial,
Yeah.
but they also presented other evidence,
Okay.
like her internet search history, financial records, and witness testimony that backed up Andrew's story.
So they had a lot to go on.
They did. And the jury agreed. After only 90 minutes of deliberation, they found Holly guilty.
Wow. 90 minutes.
Yeah.
That's fast.
It really shows how strong the prosecution's case was.
Okay.
They didn't leave much room for doubt.
So what was her sentence?
The judge sentenced her to 2 life terms.
Wow, that's even more than Andrew got.
It is.
So it seems like they really saw her as the mastermind.
Yeah, you could say that.
But what about Willow?
Oh, that's the heartbreaking part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
She's just a toddler, and now she has to grow up without either parent.
It's so sad.
The 48 Hours episode shows this really sad scene of Willow crying for her mom after seeing some of her belongings.
Oh.
It just reminds you of all the innocent lives that are affected by these acts of violence.
And she's so young. Like, how is she going to process all of this?
That's something that experts are still trying to understand.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer when it comes to healing from this kind of loss.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure, Willow needs all the love and support she can get.
Right. So who's taking care of her now?
Well, she was placed in the care of Alyssa's mom, Teresa.
Okay.
So not only is Teresa grieving the loss of her daughter,
Right.
but she's also now raising a child who's been through this unimaginable trauma.
That's a lot for one person to handle.
It is, but it really speaks to the strength and resilience of the human spirit.
Yeah.
Even in the face of such terrible loss, there's still love and hope and this determination to take care of the next generation.
Yeah. It really is amazing to see. So what would you say is like the biggest takeaway from this whole thing?
Well, for me, it's that manipulation can be just as dangerous as physical violence.
Right.
You know, Holly was able to control Andrew so completely.
Wow.
She warped his sense of reality and convinced him to do something truly horrific.
Right.
And it shows you that abuse can be really subtle.
Yeah. You don't always see it coming.
And in this case, it wasn't just Andrew and Alyssa who were affected. It impacted their families, their friends, even the whole community.
Think about Alyssa's family.
Right.
They not only lost her,
Mm-hmm.
but then they had to find out that someone they trusted
Yeah.
was involved in her death.
It's like a betrayal on so many levels.
Yeah. And it makes you think about the people in your own life.
Right.
Like, are there signs of manipulation that we're missing?
That's a good point.
I think this case really highlights the need for more awareness
Absolutely.
and education about domestic violence.
Yeah. And we need better support systems for victims.
Okay. So it sounds like Alyssa's story is about a lot more than just her death.
It is.
It's about love
Mm-hmm.
and resilience
Yeah.
and making sure that people feel safe enough to ask for help.
I think that's a powerful message.
Yeah.
Alyssa's legacy should be one of awareness and prevention.
Right.
We need to break the cycle of violence.
Well, thank you so much for breaking down this case for us.
It was my pleasure.
It was really complicated and emotional, but I think it's important to talk about these things.
I agree.
And, if anyone out there is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help.
Yes, there are resources available.
You're not alone.
And there are people who want to help.
So that's it for today's deep dive. We'll see you.